My Ferrylink Dover to Calais ferries sponsor ITV London weekday weather.
Pop pensions and childcare. The Queen maps out Parliament's race to the general election. New laws on plastic bags and fracking, sacking MPs and slavery. But the economy will dominate.
At the heart of this Queen's speech is our long-term economic plan based on a clear set of values.
The big question for this Queen's speech is whether it just offers more of the same or whether it offers a new direction.
So tonight, far from regal, the Home Secretary and Education Secretary clash over Islamist infiltration in schools.
A baby dies, 14 suffer blood poisoning at south of England hospitals. A contaminated drip is suspected.
In from the heat, the moment Sergeant Bo Bergdahl was handed over by the Taliban amid mystery over his motives.
And on behalf of their grandparents, the French children who sang a thank you to D-Day veterans.
This is ITV News at 6:30 with Alistair Stewart and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. 11 new bills and 11 months to pass them in before the general election. Her Majesty dealt with the formalities. MPs then immediately went into battle on pension reform, childcare and modern slavery.
David Cameron, accused by Labour of presiding over a zombie parliament, said it was a busy programme from a radical government. Ed Miliband said the measures did not meet the scale of Britain's problems. Our political editor Tom Bradby reports.
In an ever-changing world, even the Queen must keep up with the times, so she arrived at Parliament today in a brand new coach with electric windows. Not that they got used. That aside, it was protocol as usual. Black Rod came to demand MP's presence and Dennis Skinner made a joke.
Coalition's last stand.
It always feels strange to hear the Queen saying words written for her by her political leaders. It's certainly hard to imagine her discussing her long-term economic plan with the Duke over dinner. But if that's what it says on the page, that is what it says on the page.
My government's legislative programme will continue to deliver on its long-term plan to build a stronger economy and a fairer society.
The practical purpose of the Queen's speech is to set out what Parliament's going to do for the rest of the year. The political to frame a message for voters. So the headline measures today were on big economic issues like pensions. That aside, it was a mixed bag of 11 bills, including new tax-free childcare measures worth up to £2,000 a year per child, a modern slavery bill that will make the reporting of human trafficking a legal duty, planning reforms that will see the construction of new garden cities in a bid to ease the housing crisis. Voters will also be able to trigger a by-election when an MP has committed serious wrongdoing. An infrastructure bill will support the development of shale gas by the controversial fracking process, and there'll be a 5p charge for plastic bags in England from October 2015. In thanking another speaker in the debate that followed, who'd appeared in the ITV show Splash, Ed Miliband did make a self-deprecating joke about his bacon sandwich eating.
Can I say to her, if she's looking for a new challenge, she should try wrestling a bacon sandwich live on national television.
But his overall message was serious.
It is a basic belief of the British people that if you work all the hours God sends, you should at least be able to make ends meet. But we should listen to the voices of all of those people who say their reality today is that hard work is not rewarded.
And the Prime Minister? We'll have a wild guess at his message.
At the heart of this Queen's speech is our long-term economic plan based on a clear set of values. It is wrong to pass on an irresponsible burden of debt to our children. It is right that people should keep more of the money that they earn.
There you have it, the election battle in a nutshell. Tom Bradby, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, threatening to overshadow the Queen's speech today was an extraordinary row between two Conservative cabinet ministers. It centres on claims that Muslim hardliners are taking over schools in Birmingham. Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, and Theresa May, the Home Secretary, are blaming each other for not dealing with it sooner. Our political correspondent Romilly Weeks has more.
It's a day the government really should have been presenting a united front. What's it got? Two of the Cabinet's most senior figures at each other's throats over who's to blame for extremism in Birmingham schools. Michael Gove fired the first salvo with briefings from his department suggesting the Home Office was not doing enough to tackle radicalism. The Home Secretary shot back with this, publishing a letter to the Prime Minister in which she writes that the allegations about Birmingham schools raise serious questions about the quality of school governance and asks, is it true that the Department for Education was warned in 2010? If so, why did nobody act?
Well, I think this is actually a shameful public blame game going on something that's as serious as preventing extremism. Well, you need the departments involved to be working together, not just attacking each other. And I think parents of pupils in Birmingham deserve better than this.
The origin of the row is the so-called Trojan horse plot in Birmingham. Next week, Ofsted is expected to put 5 schools out of 21 being investigated over links to Islamic extremists into special measures. ITV News understands tonight they'll include Old Know Academy, Parkview School, Golden Hillock Secondary and Nansen Primary.
There are a whole group of schools, 20-odd schools, hundreds of pupils, staff, parents and so on, who want to get on with their education. I think it's incredibly unseemly to be engaging in political conflict on this.
There have been attempts today to limit the fallout from this, with no fewer than 3 joint statements from the Department of Education and the Home Office here, with the latest saying there is no difference between the Education Secretary and the Home Secretary, who are both working energetically together. But the fact that 2 of the party's most senior figures couldn't keep this under wraps on the government's big day suggests that there are some pretty fundamental differences at the heart of government over the approach to extremism. Romilly Weeks, ITV News at the Home Office.
Well, back now to our political editor, Tom Bradby, who joins us live. Romilly talked about limiting the fallout, but has it overshadowed the Queen's speech, Tom?
Well, Alistair, as you know, part of the purpose of the Queen's speech from the government's point of view is to set the news agenda, and clearly rather too much of that today has been taken up across all mediums discussing this spat. And I think you have to put it in perspective, and Romilly said that these are 2 very senior figures, but not just that. Theresa May is much beloved on the Tory right. She's seen as a big success as Home Secretary. She's leading the current polls for potential future leader of the Tory party. She's basically unsackable. Michael Gove, too, very close to David Cameron, leading in Tory terms critical education reforms. They're both effectively unsackable members of the Cabinet. And you know what? If that wasn't the case, I think David Cameron would be thinking about sacking them, because it is an extraordinary outbreak of ill discipline at a terrible time for the government.
Tom, thank you.
A baby has died after contracting an infection believed to be from a contaminated drip administered in hospital. 14 other babies at 6 NHS hospitals in the south of England have also been infected. Well, Lewis Vaughan-Jones is outside one of them, St Thomas's in central London. Now, Lewis, we're just starting to get the details of this story. What can you tell us so far?
Well, in the last half hour, St Thomas's Hospital here have confirmed that the baby who died was being treated here. Now, there are 15 babies in total being treated at different hospitals. Many of them were premature, so they couldn't feed themselves properly, so they were on a drip. It's believed that drip was contaminated, which gave the babies blood poisoning. Now, the authorities believe they have identified this. In their investigations, they found the plant where this allegedly contaminated batch has come from, and they believe that bacteria could have entered into the system at that stage. But they say that the 14 babies who survived are responding well to treatment, and if you'd like any more information on the hospitals involved here, details are on our website.
All right, Lewis Vaughan-Jones at St Thomas's, thank you.
Malaysian police searching for a British backpacker missing for more than a week have found a body. Gareth Huntley from London was last seen setting off on what should have been a short trek through the jungle. The body was found in a pond next to the camp where he'd been volunteering. It has not yet formally been identified.
The Taliban released a video today showing the moment it handed over a captured American soldier to US forces. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl was freed after 5 years in exchange for 5 high-level Taliban prisoners held at Guantanamo Bay.
His rescuers shook hands and waved to his captors before patting him down and ushering him into a helicopter. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore has been examining the footage.
It is the Taliban video that captures the quite remarkable moment when their fighters hand over America's last POW in Afghanistan. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is in the back of the pickup truck, interacting with his guards, gaunt and blinking incessantly, but otherwise appearing in good health. Then the American helicopter swoops in. The tension is obvious. Taliban fighters armed with AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades are positioned in the immediate area and in the hills above. A white flag is flown to indicate to the 3 US Special Forces soldiers that this is no ambush. But looked at again, it is striking how efficient and friendly the exchange is. There is a handshake. One American touches his heart in a gesture of respect. The sergeant is guided away. There's a final wave and a thumbs up to signal the deal is done. Several of those who serve with Bergdahl say he deserted his post and should not be treated as a returning hero. The Black Hawk is on the ground for just 59 seconds. But before Bergdahl is taken aboard the chopper, he is frisked to ensure this is no elaborate Taliban trap and that the American POW is not wearing a suicide vest. With that dramatic US-Taliban encounter, Bergdahl was in American hands for the first time in 5 years. Whether he returns to face a court-martial remains to be seen, but the Taliban had a final message for their former prisoner and for the American people. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Still to come, 25 years on from mass protests in Tiananmen Square, the Chinese ensure there is no repeat.
And an entire French town, liberated on D-Day, hails the returning British soldiers who set them free. That and the latest on the search for Madeleine McCann. When we come back, join us then.
So thin, so intense. Excellence. Experience the unexpected with Excellence, a touch of sea salt. Lindt, master chocolatier since 1845.
Hello and welcome back. Tiananmen Square was surrounded by Chinese police today, an attempt to silence any protests on this, the 25th anniversary of the massacre in Beijing. Hundreds died when the military disrupted student demonstrations there, and the government has suppressed all talk of it ever since. But as our China correspondent Lucy Watson reports, there are still those who are determined to remember.
The power of this moment, dawn on June the 4th, is lost on a generation who know little about this state's most heavily guarded secrets. And the might of this regime once again was intimidating today, shielding Tiananmen Square from remembering a massacre that killed hundreds. Because 25 years ago the army used brute force on defenseless ordinary people. A barbaric response by the government to impassioned calls for greater democracy. Before the slaughter, thousands demanded an end to corruption. A day later, just one man symbolized that defiance. But a quarter of a century on, those also there are difficult to find in Beijing and constantly watched.
I saw so many dead bodies. They were all very young. They shouldn't have died.
Wang Tao and Ling Fei spent 10 and 17 years behind bars for their involvement.
The most horrifying thing was the tanks crushing people to a pulp.
But official secrecy wants to mask the event. There's a police presence even here, and we're 2 miles away from the square. We've had to come above street level to be able to report on this story, because if you get out of a car with a camera, officers will immediately stop you. Security even blocked cemeteries housing victims of the slaughter today. And online, any attempt to find out about it is denied. Your search cannot be displayed, it reads. So you have to go to Hong Kong to be allowed to remember, 1,000 miles from where it happened. Tonight, here was a challenge posed by 100,000 people, an event not to be ignored. Lucy Watson, ITV News, Beijing.
Here, a terrorism trial could be heard entirely in secret for the first time in an English court. Senior judges have been hearing that the Crown Prosecution Service wants the case to be dealt with completely behind closed doors on the grounds of national security. The trial relates to 2 defendants only referred to as AB and CD.
Now, the man once implicated in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann says he hopes the new police searches will end, finally, any doubt over his innocence.
Robert Murat won libel damages after a series of false allegations in newspapers. As digging continued in Praia de Luz today, he spoke to our correspondent, Martin Geisler.
The search on this wasteland in Praia de Luz is growing. Police teams have surveyed the scrub from above and at ground level. Today they used specialist radar devices to assess what lies beneath the soil. And there have been unexpected discoveries, like this hole. It was covered with corrugated metal sheets and a layer of earth. Today, officers put a tent across it for protection. Then, dressed in forensic suits, they carried out a close inspection. This is just the latest chapter in the 7-year hunt for a little girl whose disappearance changed many lives. Not least Robert Murat's. A suspect for more than a year, his name was cleared in 2008, but connections to the case still haunt him.
The fact is, in some people's minds, there's still going to be a link. So finding out the truth of what happened will conclusively take me out of that. So yeah, it's really important that something does happen and they do find out what happened.
Mr Murat accepts that could extinguish all hope for Kate and Gerry McCann, but he says it would end the agony of uncertainty.
If something is found, then again it's going to put everything back into context, and for people to understand what's especially the parents, to understand what happened here.
The search here will continue for a few more days at least. Police accept it may yield nothing, but at least it demonstrates they're doing everything they can. Martin Geisler, ITV News, in Praia de Luz on the Algarve.
Finally, the D-Day veterans returning to Normandy 70 years on journeyed inland today to visit one of the French villages they helped to liberate, and they were met with a hero's welcome.
Later on the beaches, the veterans laid a wreath for their fallen comrades. Paul Davis is on Sword Beach tonight. Paul.
Yes, Mary, this is Sword Beach, where 70 years ago thousands of British soldiers came ashore. As you say, many of the veterans are back in Normandy. We've had a number of small events here today. The biggest ceremony, attended by world leaders, takes place just a few yards along the beach on Friday. But today the largest group of veterans travelled inland for an emotional reunion with people who have good reason to think rather a lot of them. Something very special is happening to bring more than half the population of this small Normandy town out onto the streets in the pouring rain. That something special is the return of the British. 70 years after they liberated Touriacourt, the old soldiers are still greeted as heroes.
Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour.
Especially by a new generation of French citizens.
I love you.
Bob Lafferty was with the first British soldiers who entered this town 70 years ago.
The Germans, when they were retreating, they just burnt it down as reprisal.
So they left this town in a terrible state.
Yeah.
What were the people like when they saw that you'd come in and liberated them?
So happy, even with all the problems, you know, even the bombing and shelling, they were so happy that we arrived.
Today, Bob was asked to lay a wreath, remembering the members of his regiment, the 59th Staffordshires, who died liberating Turi-Harcourt. The ruined chateau is a reminder of what the Nazis did here and why the mayor says they owe the veterans so much.
All the town was destroyed. You can see only the church was still here, but every house were destroyed. But for that, we love our liberators.
This small town has never forgotten the brutality it suffered under the Nazi occupation, or the debt it owes to the British soldiers who liberated it. And at ceremonies like this, they're trying to make sure that memory is passed on to future generations. And the children of Turi-Harcourt had been practicing a special song for this occasion. Paul Davis, ITV News, Normandy.
That is it for now.
Join me and Julie Etchingham at 10:10 tonight after the football, but from the two of us, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello to you. A very good evening. Well, for most of us, it's been a horrible day. We've had a good deal of cloud cover, pouring rain in many locations. This is the earlier radar and satellite picture. The rain giving much of Scotland, Northern England, Wales and the Midlands are soaking. For the rest of us, a little drier to end the day. The best of any late and low sunshine maybe for these southern coastal counties, but by and large, it's been a bit of a write-off. And temperatures have been very much on the low side for the time of year, as you can see from the yellowy colours on the map. But that's set to change in the next few days as we roll towards the weekend. Well, warming up quite nicely. Much warmer air working its way in from the near continent. Temperatures boosted a few degrees by then. We could see our warmest day of the year so far, but with it, heavy, intense, thundery downpours and feeling increasingly close and muggy. Back to tonight, and today's rain stalls across parts of Scotland and the northeast, elsewhere drier, clearer and a little cooler, especially through the south and the southwest tomorrow morning. That rain slow to shift across Scotland and the north and the northeast. First thing tomorrow morning, slowly easing but staying dull and damp through much of mainland Scotland all day. Elsewhere, well, our patience pays off. A vast improvement on today. Much better, much brighter, some lovely sunshine. Just the outside chance of a shower cropping up here and there. But most of us getting away with a dry day, and temperatures up a few degrees as well. We could see highs of 16 or 17 degrees in the north, maybe around 20 degrees in the south. As for Friday, more of the same, some lovely sunshine once more before things go downhill from the west, and feeling a touch warmer, if anything, highs of 23 degrees by then. I'll see you